This is why St. Paul says, God delivered them in the desires of their hearts to uncleanness. So when you reject God, God is going to deliver you up. He's not going to say, no, you can't reject me. No, God is a loving God, and He gives you free will. If you reject God, God will not be in your life. And so St. Paul is saying, once they rejected God, now their own desires started to work in the world. So now they started to feel what the world was like without God. And what St. Paul is saying is, they started to feel sin, and he's saying, he's kind of, in this sense, and when he's describing the universal gospel and describing why everyone's guilty, he's also describing the process of sin. So the first thing that happens is you reject God. Maybe not as bluntly as worshiping an idol, but you say, God's law in my life is not applicable at this second. God's law in my life is not applicable in this second, and I'm going to do this, okay? So that's the first part, is rejecting God. Now, the second part of sin is now your desires come out. And so that's why this says sin is rooted in idolatry. This is the first part. This is the first step, is not following the gospel of God, not following not having the attitude of wanting to do the things of God, but wanting to do the things I want to do. This is why it's so important always. This is why everyone always says, read the Bible, read the Bible, read the Bible. And you get sick of it. You're like, okay, I'll read the Bible. But this is why, because reading the Bible is keeping the law of God in your mind. And once you step away from the Bible, once you distance yourself from the Bible, once you distance yourself from prayer and thinking in that attitude, then you might forget the law of God. Then you might say, well, this makes more sense, and you haven't really heard anything from the law of God today. So then you say, well, I'm going to use my own thoughts and my own desires, and then sin starts happening. Because of this, God delivered them over to the passions of dishonor. Now he starts talking of what starts to happen. So now they have passions of dishonor because they rejected God. For their females exchanged the natural use for that which is against nature. And likewise also the males left the natural use of the female, and were burning up in their longing towards one another, males with males, working out the improper things and receiving in themselves the recompense of their error which was fit. So the first step was rejecting God. The second was making your own desires. And now your passions start coming alive. And he says, this is what happened. This is what happens when you reject God. Their females exchanged the natural use for what is good, and then their males did things that were unnatural. And I think we know what St. Paul is talking about, and he's obviously condemning homosexuality in females and in males. And what happened in the Roman Empire at that time was there was like homosexuality was rampant at the time. Females were sold for their bodies. They were sold, and even little boys were sold, and they were sold for their bodies. And what happened was, after they rejected God, everyone kind of became an object. Everyone became an object of the other person's desire. You see what happens when you reject God is your desires come out, and then because of your desires are rampant, then your desires make the other person an object. And this is what always happens. You young girls out there, you have to understand that your bodies are sacred, and that those people that desire your body and that are telling you that you're beautiful and you're this and you're that, and they want to be close to your body, what they're doing is making you an object of their desire. And don't let anyone ever make you an object of your desire. You're sacred, human, and you're not an object. You're for God. So this is what happens with sin. You reject God, your passions come out, and now everyone becomes an object. And that's why this is what the natural progression was. The unnatural progression was that everyone became objects, so that now the females were just used as objects, the males were just used as objects, and everyone was an object, and whatever I felt went. And everyone just became belittled, and everyone had really no value. And St. Paul is also trying to tell us that, you sin, and then it's going to lead to more sin. And this is, everyone, we all know sin. We all have experienced sin, and we all know that you do one sin, and if you don't stop it, then you're going to want to do another step of sin. And then, after that, you're going to want to do like a little bit more, something more exciting, more sinful. And that's just that's how sin progresses. We were in a discussion in campus when I went to Miami, an Orthodox priest, and one of the people asked the Orthodox priest, like, is kissing wrong? And he didn't answer. He said, I'm not going to answer the question, but I'm going to tell you that once you do one thing, you can't go back. You can only go forward. So once you kiss, kissing after a while might get a little bit boring. It might get old. So what's the next step? Fill in the blank. And then that might get old. And then the next step. Until it just becomes this progression of sin, until there's homosexuality, until there's just perversion among perversion, and sin does not stop, and it only becomes more and more sin. And this is what St. Paul is saying. This is an interesting thing, a point on the Greek language. So when St. Paul is saying that burning up in their longing towards one another, males with males, and then he's talking about females, he uses the word arson and thelis versus aner and genus. Arson and thelis, arson meaning male and thelis meaning female, aner meaning man, and genus meaning woman, okay? So St. Paul uses arson and thelis, right? He fails to call them men. He fails to call them women. He calls them male and female. Because what they did was they became no longer human-like, no longer men of God, no longer in the image of God, but they just became gender. You see what he's saying? By doing this, you just became gender. You just became almost animal-like, where all you do is just fill out your gender. Your gender rules you, and you're not a man. You're not a woman. You're just a male, and you're just a female. It's just an interesting point, the way St. Paul says that humanity was reduced to just gender, just animal-like. And just as they did not approve to have God in real knowledge, God delivered them to an unapproved mind, to do the things which are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness. And then St. Paul goes into all the things that the whole world was guilty of, not just Gentiles. Evil, greed, malice, full of envy, murder, strife, guile, malignity. They are whisperers, evil speakers, God-haters, abusive, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, unobedient to parents, uninsightful, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful, and although they really know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give consent to those who practice them. So here St. Paul is saying, look, you rejected God personally in your life, and it spread. And now what happened was all these things happened, not only in your life, but in society. Now the society around you is full of these things because you rejected God. And he says, not only do you do the same, but you also say it's good to practice those things. And honestly, sorry. you can see this in our society. You can see this pretty strongly in our society.